Thank you, Jinya. Before we consider today's words of scripture and today's message, I want to take a quick moment to express words of gratitude and thanks. Thanks to Clint and Taylor and the Gathering Band for leading us in worship. I want to thank all of our people who are volunteering in children's ministry and in youth ministry, people who are volunteering teaching Sunday school classes upstairs. I want to thank all the folks who are running the lights and the cameras and the internet stream and making us gathering together via technology online possible. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all your places in ministry. Thank you to all the greeters, the hospitality folks, the coffee makers, each and every one of you. Thank you for your place in ministry here at the church. If we haven't met before, my name is Lance Marshall. I am one of the pastors here at First Church. And one of my favorite things to do in ministry is facilitate small groups. When people get together and they're going to have, maybe it's a Bible study, or maybe it's a faith discussion group, or maybe it's something else. But when people are getting together and they're going to be vulnerable and they're going to share, I love that stuff. I am all about it. Everything else I do is just to get to go to that place. Really love doing that. And there's this exercise that I found, and by found I mean stole, from another church. And it's an exercise of how you can kind of help people get to know each other and get started in a relationship. And it's called a life map. And it's a really simple little exercise. Basically, it's an x-axis that goes across left to right. And the y-axis, and the x-axis that travels left to right is the years of your life, the different seasons of your life. Things like childhood, and when I was in middle school and high school and college and young adulthood and so on and so forth. That's the x-axis that travels from left to right. And the y-axis up and down. By the way, I'm not sure if I'm using x and y-axis right, so if you're an engineer, please just hang with me. The y-axis that goes up to negative 10, or up to positive 10 and down to negative 10 is your overall state of happiness and well-being during that season of your life. Would you be a plus 10? Would you be a 0, kind of neutral? Would you be a negative 10, somewhere in between? Kind of map out your life. And then you go around the group and you kind of tell your story and why I was at that place at different points in my life. And so I've done that exercise a whole bunch. And whenever I do it, there's a season in my life when I'm mapping out my life map left to right. That's the negative 10. It's the bottom of the list. That was the worst point. And it wasn't, for those of you who've been around and kind of heard me share some of my story before, it wasn't stage 4 cancer with no job and no health insurance. It wasn't a couple years later after I had a child, but cancer's come back and the chances of me making it are really rough. It wasn't locked in the pandemic in the midst of a freeze with no internet and no heat. It wasn't any of those points. It was a different point in my life. When I'm doing my life map and I'm looking at the negative 10 season in my life, the worst that it was the season that correlated with my last year of college and my first year of being out in the real world. That was my negative 10 season. That's where I was at the worst. That's where I was the most miserable, right? That's like age 20, 21, 22, this time that people talk about as being a lot of fun and you're young and all your joints work and you can stand up without making a sound. That was the season that for me was negative 10. And the reason is a bunch of different things had kind of come together to make that negative 10. One was there was an organization that I was a part of in college that I spent all my energy at and I had a lot of friends in and was really involved in. And I wish I could tell you it was like a Christian service organization. And it was not. It was the College Humor magazine. But I had spent all my time there, and it's where my friends were, and that was my thing, right? And coming up with those articles and all that, that's what I loved. And to be perfectly honest, what had happened at that organization is I was a young man who was really egocentric and kind of rough-edged, and I had alienated myself from all of my friends, and eventually ended up leaving that organization. It was really painful. I didn't have anything to replace it with. And at the same time, I had friends that I had gone to school with. I went to Texas, and for my graduating high school class, Texas was kind of like the 13th grade. And so a whole bunch of us were there together, but we had grown apart because we hadn't maintained close relationships, hadn't really fed into them, and we were all kind of doing our own thing at that point, and so we weren't as close. The most important person in the world to me, the most important relationship in my life is the relationship with my wife, and who was my high school sweetheart, and we were on again and off again in college, and we were off again at that moment because one of us was an idiot and scared of commitment. And you get one guess on who that was. So I didn't have that relationship in my life. And all of those things were corresponding to make it a tough period in my life, but the reason behind it, the through line between how I got to that place, was I was chasing a bad story. I was chasing a bad story at that time in my life. At that time in my life, what I had come to believe was that the most important thing for me was the career. and getting it started and getting all of your ducks in a row with the degree and the grades and the internships and the opportunities and the position and the what next and the what now. And I had put everything else aside while I had focused on that. And that was going well, and everything else was on fire. And looking back, I call that the most miserable time of my life. That's my negative 10 moment. And I think the reason that it was a negative 10 for me more than anything else when I'm looking back at it was I was incredibly, heartbreakingly, achingly lonely. I was at the middle of a huge university surrounded by tens of thousands of people. I had a phone full of people that I could call that would pick up the phone if I called them. And I was heartbreakingly, achingly lonely. We're in a new sermon series right now called Where No One Walks Alone. For those of you who are new to this church, one of the things that we do is we organize our messages and our seasons around the idea of things that are really important for us to focus on. And one of my jobs as the co-senior pastor here at the church is to help to make sure the church is really focused on the needs of the mission field that surrounds us. And when I say mission field, I mean the people that God has called us to reach out and serve with the good news of the gospel. Our mission field are your neighbors, are your coworkers, are your friends, your in-laws. That is our mission field. And one of the things that has become incredibly clear over the course of recent years is that our mission field is suffering, is being crushed under the weight, is deeply struggling with an epidemic of loneliness. And I know that this is the case, and I was preparing myself to do some studying and do some research, and I was like, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll look up a couple different studies, or I'll find a website or an article or something like that, and I'll quote some statistics. And can I be honest with you guys? It was overwhelmingly depressing. If you just Google loneliness or loneliness problem in our world, it is unreal the amount of research and articles and news reports that testify to the fact that at every age group and every demographic and every slice of society, from 6 to 16 to 96, people are suffering under the reality of loneliness. One of the things that they keep track of are something called deaths of despair. Deaths of despair, related to things like self-harm or substance abuses or things like that. And deaths of despair are out of control, and they're particularly out of control in communities that look exactly like our mission field. Our mission field is suffering under an epidemic of loneliness. And so one of the things that's imperative for us as a church community, right? And by us, I don't just mean the people who are on the staff. I don't just mean the people who get up and speak on a Sunday. I mean you, the people in the pews, you, the people watching from your lake house or your friend's lake house, or you, the people who just couldn't quite get out of bed this morning. I want to see you next week. No matter who you are and how you're affiliated, we are the church. And one of the things that our mission field desperately needs is help with this problem of loneliness. I found a definition for loneliness that I think really helps. So I'm going to ask them, pull it up on the screen. Loneliness is the difference between the relationships that you desire and the relationships that you have. Loneliness occurs when there's a gap between the relationships you desire and the relationships that you have. That's what loneliness actually means. And it's incredibly tricky in our time and place to talk about relationships, because you can't come up with the concept of relationships or connection in our modern world today without talking about things like social media or all that kind of stuff. And now, I'm not up here at all to be anti-social media. Side note, I am very anti-social media. But I'm not doing that today. I am pointing out, though, that social media makes it seem like there's a connection. It makes it seem and feel like there's a connection, right? We can just meet somebody at a conference, right? And then exchange a handle, and pretty quick, you know what their kids look like, you know what sports teams they're interested in, you know what kind of truck they have. You just wish you knew their politics, but nobody's willing to share it online. So you're just left guessing. I wish I knew what they thought about the pandemic. I wish I knew what they thought about politics, but no one's willing to share. You have this facsimile of a connection, right? It seems like you're connected. But are you? And one of the things that also comes up in the studies, I'm going to ask them to bring up on the screen right now. is that what is more important for connection, actual connection, right, is not the number of the people. It's not even how much you know about them. You can know literally everything about them, all the names of their kids, all the names of their grandkids, where they're at in their professional career, their passions, interests, everything, etc. Connection is found in the quality of relationships, not in the quantity. And by quality of relationship, what a quality relationship is a relationship into which you can come and just fall apart. A quality relationship is one in which you're willing to let the veneer of everything being okay put to the side. A quality relationship is one in which you can stand and say, this is what I'm actually feeling, this is how I'm actually hurting, this is what I'm actually doubting, this is where I'm actually struggling, and this is what I actually need, and know that the person on the other side of that conversation, even if they're not able to meet those needs, at least cares and is present and is with you in the middle of it. That is a quality relationship. And without those right now, you are either in or teetering on the edge of incredible loneliness. And that's where the people of faith step in. Our scripture reading today is from chapter 9, and Matthew's telling a personal story here, right? This is Matthew's gospel. Matthew's telling a personal story. And in this story, Matthew is serving a role called a tax collector. Now, for those of you who have been here for a long time, you may have heard this already, so give me 60 seconds to explain it to the other folks. In their time and place, right, the role of taxes and tax collector is incredibly different than the one that exists in our society today. Remember, the people of Israel are under foreign military occupation. Romans have come in and have taken over everything, and the tax collectors are people who support that occupation. Imagine, in your community here, Fort Worth, Texas, imagine that Texas had been overrun by a foreign power. Their armies fill our streets. All of our authorities are not elected by us, but are appointed by them for the maintenance of their preferred social order. They're constantly tamping down on the things that we can do that express our Texanness. They're constantly trying to wipe out our identity. And all around our community, they're erecting monuments to themselves. And all of this is paid for by taxes that they take from us and use for them to support their military occupation, their erasure of our culture, and erecting monuments to themselves. And the people who collect the taxes for them are not their foreign soldiers, but they're our neighbors and family members who have been corrupted by them. This foreign power has reached out and said, look, we need to raise taxes. You know that that's the case. And here's the deal. If you take on this job, if you turn on your neighbors, if you turn against the people who are around you, right, and you extort money from them, these egregious taxes that we're stealing from them for the purposes of supporting our occupying force, not only will you do that, but anything that you take extra on top of that, anything that you extort from them in addition to what we're demanding, anything else that you steal, rob, or coerce from them, you can keep for yourself, to support a lifestyle as extravagant as you want it to be. That's who tax collectors are in Jesus' world. And Matthew is one of them. And Jesus, walking by, sees this man. Jesus sees this man who's sold out his neighbors, his friends, his religious community, his country, his identity, and every meaningful relationship along the way. And what does Jesus say to him? Does Jesus first preach at him? He has a right to do so. Does Jesus first condemn him? Everyone else thinks he should. What does Jesus do first? Come with me, he says. Walk with me. Stay with me. Eat with me. Be with me, Jesus says. In this hypothetical of us being overrun by this foreign nationality, Canadians, who are extorting us for their hockey rinks and their maple syrup fountains, and they're banning our brisket and our sweet tea. If one of our neighbors, if one of our friends, if one of our family members is in order with them, is aligned with them, is allegiant with them, would you still be connected? Would you still be friends? Would you still be inviting them over dinner? Would they still have a place on the cookout? No. Jesus sees Matthew and the people like Matthew, and he sees them as sinners because they are, and he sees them as turncoats because they are, And he sees them as people who have sold out everything for wealth and power, because they are that. And he also sees him as incredibly, crushingly lonely. So he says, come with me. The main point, this message, the main point is that Jesus seeks out the lost and the lonely. Jesus seeks out the lost and the lonely. Hear this. He uses this metaphor of a doctor, and he's not a doctor who's just located in the office. He's not a doctor who's just waiting for you to come make an appointment. He's not just a doctor who's waiting for you to declare yourself as sick and to be asking for help. He is a doctor who is going out and seeking and looking for and finding the people who need him the most. Jesus seeks out the lost and the lonely. We are Jesus followers, so we seek out the lost and the lonely too. Where no one walks alone is a vision statement, is marching orders for our community of faith, First Church. Where no one walks alone is a badge of pride. Where no one walks alone is a sense of identity, and it says, for you who are lost and lonely, for you who have found yourself in a position of life, whether you're 16 or 26 or 96, where you find yourself needing connection, needing belonging, needing a place where you can know other people and be known by them in return. We are your place, and we are here for you. Where no one walks alone is an effort to reach out to our mission field, the people who God has given to us, the people who no one else is as ready to reach as you are, and says, we are here to help with one of the biggest problems in their life. So I have a job for you. This ends with you getting a job. Did you realize that? That's how this ends. The first job is to ask yourself, how am I doing? How am I doing? How are you doing? Don't ask yourself how I'm doing. I'm doing okay. How are you doing? Do you have real connections? Do you have real people who know you and care? I know your phone is full. I know you have 8,000 followers on TikTok, right? Y'all are a TikTok-heavy community. I know it. I know you've got your phone full of people that you could pick up the phone and call and they would answer, right? But how's the quality? How's the quality? Do you have it? Do you have someone else other than just an intimate partner, right? People you can say, this is where I'm hurting. This is how I'm suffering. This is what I'm doubting. This is what I'm struggling to carry the burden in. How are you doing? Because if you're looking for those people, if you're looking for that place, if you're looking for that opportunity, we are it. Whether it's grace groups, small groups that meet every week for really sharing each other's lives and growing together, whether it's Sunday school classes, whether it is in Bible studies, whether it's the people who just make sure that this place is hospitable and welcoming, how are you doing? Because the first and foremost thing you do need to do is make sure that you are not suffering in the same way that the people you love are. And then once you are, the next step is to help somebody else find what you found. Once you have found in this place the kind of connections, the kind of relationships, the kind of being known and understood and valued that makes a difference in your life, the next job is to share it. Because friends, that's not something that's just helpful. That's not something that's just good. That is something that is ordained by God, who's given a mission to this church. When we think of serving and being the hands and feet of Christ, so often we limit that to just things like when we volunteer as a church at Trinity Habitat for Humanity, or when we volunteer at our mission, or when we support our justice ministry, and all of those things are exactly being the hands and feet of Christ. And so is making the coffee. And so is standing on the front porch and making sure that no one can make it through our parking lot without a smile. So is talking to your neighbor and saying, hey, this is what I found. I'd love to meet you there some morning. If you're lucky, Tim's preaching. If not, it'll be okay. Damn, I thought that was going to be funny. The College Humor magazine would be very disappointed to know how I'm doing. That's serving as the hands and feet of Christ. That is serving as the hands and feet of Christ. That is stepping knee deep into your mission field and what they desperately need, because the people around you, your next door neighbors, your brother-in-law, your sister-in-law, your college friends, your coworkers, your colleagues, regardless of how beautifully curated their Instagram feed is, regardless of the kind of front that they put up before and after meetings in the hallways, Regardless of how they sound in the first 5 minutes of your catch-up phone call, chances are more likely than not that they are feeling crushed under the weight of loneliness, and the number one person that can help them is you. Jesus seeks out the lost and the lonely. Jesus' followers do the same. This is a place where no one walks alone. Let's help the people who need it find it. Let's pray. Jesus, when you see Matthew, the tax collector, what we see is someone who is egregiously sinning. What we see is someone worth condemnation and judgment, alienation, harassment. Jesus, you see all those things, and someone who is also deeply, crushingly alone. Lord, help us reach out to the people who need, more than anything else, a place to be known, a place to belong, a place where they can share how they're really doing. And Lord, let that start with each and every one of us. Help us to find that place. Help us to be that people. Help us to be the kind of church where no one walks alone. Jesus, we follow this vision as we believe in your grace and trust in your words, praying together the prayer that you taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, and thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.